G'day! Today we are going to be going over the mason chain, or better known as the flail. So interestingly enough, a lot of people have preconceived opinions on the flail. Most people will compare it to being a overpowered weapon that had made everything more dangerous just because of the chain and acceleration using physics of the weighted ball on the end. Other people will say that it's similar to nunchucks, where you essentially don't really have that much of a add to the power, and you end up losing a lot of energy in that way. Today, I am going to actually be going into that and just see whether or not either opinion is made true, or if my own opinion is it's roughly about the same amount of power as it would be if you had the exact same thing made into a mace. For the mace, I actually do have a fairly decent comparison here. It is not quite the same amount of weight for the head. That was a lot harder to do, and I wasn't able to get the exact same style of weighted ball and head to make for this. However, lengthwise, these are close to the same length. There's only a small difference there, but I don't think that'll make for any major difference in how they compare to each other and perform. Secondly, this mace that I built, as just a little bit of foreknowledge on what it is, this is actually a 1.25 inch bolt, or not bolt, this is actually a 1.25 inch nut that I managed to find, and I ground in several edges to it to try to give some focused impact points. Hopefully we'll be able to get some good results out of that. Our target is just a melon. Though I know there's better targets you could use for this, I just wanted something to crush and something to feed to the chickens. So getting into the mace, or the flail itself real quick, we do see different iconography showing the flail throughout history in a lot of different ways, though this one likely was not, if at all, a common battlefield weapon. If it did show up, it was rare. The more common version of the flail would have been the two-handed flail. These were based somewhat loosely off of medieval threshing tools for threshing wheat. Sometimes they would be blown up for the assault head for attacking with. This one is actually a little bit over the top in size. I made it with just some pieces I had lying around here on the farm. Just for the fun of it, I wanted to make one and just kind of swing it around a little bit. These were pretty heavily used during the Hussite Wars, I believe. And what they would do is they would have war wagons that they would be more or less making a wooden fortress out of as they would move about. And a lot of Hussites would use these to strike over top of their opponents' shields and strike them more heavily, a damaging blow within the armor. This is not one of our analogs today. I only brought this out as an example. Future video, I might go over it more thoroughly than I have so far in the past. Back into the flail, my own theory on it is being more of a tournament-style weapon, something that you can use one-on-one in a much more controlled environment. It's not that it's unpredictable, it's just more difficult to use when there's a larger number of people due to the nature of how you have to use it in order to keep from injuring yourself. If you actually learn how to use a tool, such as a flail, the weapon isn't more dangerous to its user than it is to your enemy. It's just as dangerous to them as it could be to you. If you get good at using it, then ergo, it's no longer as dangerous to you as it is to them. It is extremely simple to actually learn. The very first flail that I ever interacted with was a toy that my dad made for me when I was 6. And as a 6-year-old, quite quickly I learned how to swing it and strike with it without hurting myself. And if a 6-year-old can do it, I am 100% certain that a trained knight can easily master such a tool. Alrighty, so getting into how the tests are going to work. I'm going to be doing several different strikes with each of the flail and mace, using different methods, such as one set of tests I'll do will be holding a shield for counterbalance. The other will be just freehand. The whole goal of that is just to see how much damage we can do to the melon. And I will try to do, to the best of my ability, duplicate the exact same swings with the mace. That all said, let's get into it, and we're going to open up with trying the flail first. Alrighty. To be honest, I should have expected that. So as you can see, the watermelon is thoroughly decimated. This won't be the only test we're doing. I'm going to be doing a few other things for strength and impact tests as well, for just a soft target test. The flail does just decimate the melons. I had a feeling it could happen. They were somewhat soft. They were all on sale, which is likely why it broke like that. They're getting pretty old. Cool thing is, I didn't strike myself while swinging, and I got pretty into some of those swings. So we're going to get our next melon up and try for the mace. This actually smells kind of good over here now. Chickens are going to love it. So word of warning, as I'm getting ready to strike here, I might not be able to fully replicate how I was striking before. This watermelon might just break apart. I think that first strike I made was kind of weak, as you can see in the swing. Well, I think we can honestly say for blunt impact testing, watermelons are not a good analog. However, I needed some kind of treat for the chickens, so they'll definitely love this. They'll peck everything clean, clean up the rinds, anything left. So we're going to get into the next test where I'm going to be using some 1x4s I have just for impact striking, just to see how well they can hold up to the impact of both weapons if one does better. Mainly, how many strikes will it take before it breaks through? So we're going to get that set up and get into it. Alrighty, so but the last test had some interesting results that honestly, they don't really show much other than these are really good at hacking up watermelons. This one might prove to be a little more interesting in results. Basically, I am going to do my best to strike this 1x4, and this is the cleanest, not free wood that I could find. And we're just going to see how many strikes it would take before I can finally break through. So we're going to get into it. Woo! All right, so that was, I want to say 5 strikes before we started actually breaking through. You can see some of the denting there in the wood for how much impact force it had. So we're going to get into trying the mace. See what kind of damage we can do. So that last strike didn't actually prove anything. The board was already broke. All it did was just slip off the channel lock or C-clamp. So I think at 5 strikes was when it broke, same as the last one with the flail. Another interesting thing about the flail is, and this is kind of why I feel like it was not popular, is also its biggest weakness, but also its biggest strength. And that's the fact of when striking, if you hit the edge of a shield, the flail still gets over. Often a shield would have been held somewhat close to the body. If the top of the flail handle strikes at the top of the shield, that's almost landing directly on top of my head. That might not have enough force to punch through the helmet, even with the spikes, but that's going to hurt. Anyone who's played football and has had a headbutt with their helmet, or anyone that definitely has done to hurt or SCA and has been hit hard in the head by the heavier weapons, they know how much that's going to hurt. And the flail definitely would be good at that. That's its biggest strength, but it's also its biggest weakness, because the moment you swing and they block with their own weapon, it loses all of that momentum that's built up just by catching the chain on something. And you end up with a weapon that you can't work as well at closer ranges. You have to keep this weapon with your opponent at maximum range at all times for it to be effective. And that's a pretty big area you got to cover. You can't just be swinging non-stop, because your enemy will be able to easily telegraph what you're doing, because in order to change, you have to fully stop so that you can get control of the chain and the ball. Now, you can use it in a more surprise and shock method, keeping your shield high if you're using one, high enough to block how you're going to attack with it, because you're able to easily swing from the side, swing high and to the left, or even just be coming straight down on your opponent. You also can use your shield to help utilize the method of feinting, such as making a step inward and making your swing. This weapon is not a feinting tool. The feint would have to come from the shield to try to trick your opponent into thinking you're going to come from a different direction. And that can be done so by adjusting your shield as if you're going to be striking from the side, but instead start swinging out from the side, and you open up with it being the opposite way you're going to be swinging. That's some of the tactics you could utilize in order to make this work. As a battlefield weapon, though, as I showed before, if you want to get any kind of power, you got to get at least one half swing in. You can't just be swinging like you see in the films, above your head in a big area, non-stop. That's not going to work. Your enemy is going to easily be able to see you telegraph that move, and you won't have anyone to guard your flank or your back. So, with those two tests completed, what can we conclude? As far as output, these honestly were both equal. With the 1x4 test, you can see that it essentially took the same amount of strikes and force on each swing to break through the 1x4. The flail, I was having trouble lining up the head to strike the board dead on center. However, it still, after just a handful of swings, broke right through. It's not like I had an issue of it struggling to get through. And had I considered, because it being on a lever like it is, when you swing it, it doesn't swing straight like it would with the mace. It's going to be at a slight angle because the head is following the handle back as the handle is towing it. So that was what was getting my swing off. The watermelon test, there's not much to be concluded with that other than it was a good test on how easy it is to strike a target and to show it. It just took a couple of swings and I was used to it in no time. The mace performed about the same. For impact, these actually were pretty equal. I can't see this as being a greater impact weapon. It doesn't really accelerate the swing much, and it doesn't add as a force multiplier. They are pretty equal on the proving grounds there. I can see the flail, however, as being a somewhat more common and possibly popular tournament weapon. You're fighting more often than not one-on-one duels in the melees. You're not going into great big groups like you would with an army, so you can afford to be swinging it around and not have to worry about anyone around you and just strike your opponent. You can afford to telegraph a little bit more so long as you have a plan in place. Your armor is going to be tournament armor, so it's stronger, it's better, it can take more of a beating. So if your enemy is coming at you with a mace, such as this, you might actually have an advantage over him with the reach of this weapon, but you have to keep your distance. You can't allow yourself to get in close, because the moment your opponent is within the swing, it gets a lot more difficult to use this. There are advantages that you can use it for when they start getting close, such as I showed before, when you swing it, and if you were to strike right at the edge of their guard with the head of the handle, that head of the flail can cause a lot of damage afterwards, especially if they're guarding close to themselves. They have to keep a far guard in order to cause any kind of counter to it. In conclusion, I'm actually of the mind, and this is not common for a lot of people, but I'm of the mind that the flail is a actually useful weapon. It has its place and it has its use. It's not a bad weapon, honestly. It does serve its purpose correctly and quite well, especially when built correctly. You don't build a flail where you grab it and you can get your hand smacked by this iron ball. You need to be safe distance away from it for where you hold it, proper length of chain, proper weight of head, and proper way of securement. Function, I give it an 8 out of 10. It functions as it's designed to. There's a few flaws I see with the design of it, but that can be easily remedied later down the road. The aesthetic of it is not bad. The head looks a little bit goofy at certain angles, but it's because all the spikes were placed in a triangular shape. So you end up with this weird triangular positioning of everything where you'll have those sides where there's nothing there. So it'd be hitting with nothing but blunt impact force. Would I recommend this for anyone? Sadly, in a lot of today's world, you can't use a flail in any reenactments, Behurt, or SCA. There are versions of it that are made safe to actually fight people with in LARP and possibly in SCA. However, I can actually agree that this is a little bit too dangerous, mainly because an inexperienced person can easily really wreck someone bad, even if their opponent is more experienced. Even if it's just a plain ball, no spikes, it's pretty dangerous. It's not a toy. If you're wanting a display piece or just something to hang out with, I would fully recommend that you could enjoy it. It's not something you can really put to use other than maybe going out and smashing stuff like I did today, but it's kind of a cool little piece to have and just add to your collection with. So, thank you for watching. Let me know any other tests you might be able to come up with down in the comments. I do want to do more flail stuff in the future because I know there's a lot better ways to test these two weapons against each other to actually better prove the function and ability of both compared to each other. Other than that, thank you for watching. Let me know what you want to see down in the comments below. Until next time, take care.